Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, and I share my creative process here with you online. If you enjoy this channel, would like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, be able to read my comic books for free, and get tons of behind-the-scenes features, you can become a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/Jeremy. That's patreon.com/GERIMI. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, get notified when I have new books dropping, new art prints, and eventually when I start doing conventions again, when I'm appearing at new shows, you can sign up for my newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. Send out a newsletter once a month. I also include work in progress animated GIFs, sharing steps in terms of how I create my artwork and my comics as well. I also, share what I'm reading, what I'm watching, the media that I'm consuming, and how it affects my creative process. If you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on a Kindle or Comixology, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. That will forward you to my Amazon author page. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It is a psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. 144-page graphic novel, black and white. You can also pick up my most recent series, Morningstar, Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, told as a Western. This one, it's an 8-issue series. This book contains issues 1 through 4, plus back matter showing sketches, script excerpts, original character designs. You can get those kind of bonus features also in the conclusion to the series. Volume 2. Volume 1 is Welcome to Heaven. Volume 2 is Abandon All Hope. So both of these are available in print and digital. All right, and speaking of my patrons, I have to thank my wife for giving me a lovely idea. She also watches a lot of YouTube videos. There's people that she's subscribed to their channels. There's there's channels that she is a Patreon subscriber to, and she noticed that some of her channels, they have a scroll at the end of the episode where they list all of their patrons. And I thought to myself, well, a lot of those videos are sort of pre-uploaded. They aren't necessarily doing live streams, so that's easy to do in video editing. It's kind of harder to do in live stream. You can probably do it in OBS, but I realized I've got a ticker running underneath me. So all you patrons who've been supporting this channel and helping me create and put work out, I decided I'm just going to have that running there, along with my like, share, and subscribe message, just giving a shout out to all the patrons to thank you for your ongoing support and making the work I continue to do possible. So thank you, all of you patrons. Byron's in the chat. NMN is in the chat. Hey, guys, how you doing? All right, we've got the greetings out of the way, so let's get into it. Guess what we're doing today? Traditional painting. I've been so much with the digital, and in fact, this piece, I'm going to show you some digital roots, as it were. Here we go. Oh, this is new. I haven't tried this before. There we go, picture in picture. Normally when I do this, when I'm live streaming, I've got myself off to the side, but this picture in picture, there we go, just a tiny little me down there in the corner. Gives us a lot more room for artwork. I think I actually kind of like this. You guys let me know if you prefer the picture in picture or whether you prefer the way I've had with the slightly larger thumbnail of me. So guys, let me know what you prefer. Larger thumbnail of me or picture in picture. But for now, we'll stick with it on this episode. Just see how it goes. Anyways, let's see here. Oh, Amar's in the chat. Amar had a great tutorial for people in terms of running through the basics of Blender. I've dabbled with Blender, so I was kind of familiar with some of the concepts he was talking about, but I have only barely opened it and done a few tutorials. So I actually want to go back and dig in on that. But Amar, thank you so much for actually running that tutorial on your Discord. I'm going to port people to search for Art with Amar B on Instagram and search him on the internet. And he'll probably have links to that if he's going to have a repost of that tutorial on Blender. If you're looking to incorporate a little 3D into your artwork, he's the man to show you how to do it. And let's see here. Dr. Thomas Elliott's in the chat. How you doing? Let's see here. Yeah, looks like StreamYard has released some new features. Thank you, StreamYard. Okay, so what I'm working on here, I've mentioned that my wife is extremely patient. And I have a painting that I've been working on for her for years now. That was originally supposed to be our wedding gift. It was a dragon painting. So I've got a couple of phases here. First off, I started digital. I did some digital thumbnails, and the painting I had originally done was basically, there were some differences. This is on a really large canvas. Well, it's broken across four 18 by 24 canvases. So I guess the whole thing is 36 by 48 altogether. So it takes up a large wall in our living room. And my wife's been very patient about me. She says, go ahead, take your time, finish Morning Star. That's the thing you're passionate about. One of the reasons why I married her. But I've been working on it kind of in the background. And we got a certain point along, and she wanted to be real sensitive about it because she knows that I'm making it for her, but also it's a gift for her. So I was treating it like a client. She's like, you know, the colors are a bit darker than I really wanted. Is there a way to lighten it up? And so I went through, and as long as I was going to be making some changes, I thought, I'm not that happy with the composition. So I kind of moved some of the elements around. Originally, the woman was on the left side, and the dragon was looking straight down at her. Now I've got a nice diagonal. I have to keep the center of the piece empty of graphics because, like I said, or empty of a focus of interest, because, like I said, this is across 4 panels. So if I just put a pencil line going across here, you know, there's like 4 big ass canvases. So I have to make sure that anything that would make it, I can't put anything in this center area that would make it hard to figure out what's going on in the piece. But I did a couple of different color combinations. So I found one that my wife was fairly happy with. So a lot of light colors and warm oranges and browns. Now, based on this, I realized the biggest mistake I made the first time I started this painting, because I'm telling you, I was almost done with the original version before we got to the point where we realized that neither the client nor myself was happy with the work. And the biggest mistake that I made was that I didn't do traditional thumbnails. I did the digital thumbnails and then went right into the traditional painting. And what I should have done is what I'm doing now, and that's the phase that I'm going to be showing you, which is that after having a digital comp, so I knew kind of what I was shooting for color-wise, to use the actual paints. I'm painting in acrylics, not oils. And I should have done multiple, the same way I did multiple thumbnails here in terms of adjusting the color. What I've been doing now is using acrylic paint and doing multiple thumbnails to see how the actual paint is going to adjust this, how the colors come out. I'm going to walk you through some of those as well. See some other people in the chat. Let's see. Emmanuel's in the chat. And says hello, and I like that color palette. Thank you so much. Well, the color palette shifts a little bit, and this is something that I'm going to go back and forth with the client, my wife. Once I get to a final thumbnail that I'm really happy with, I'm going to show her all of these steps I'm showing you and show her how I got to from this piece, which is the thumbnail that she was like, yeah, I like that one, to what I think I will be able to do in the original, which I actually think is richer. So moving from the digital, I had these laying by my my artboard while I created this. So I took a couple of different, first off, let me show you my colors. So normally I tend to work very, very bright. In fact, I intentionally, because I work in graphic design, I've been working with the CMYK palette in the past. I usually would use like cadmium yellow, cerulean blue, and I can't remember the name of the magenta, but it was like a strong, like pure magenta. I think it was like pure magenta dark. But anyway, I like Liquitex acrylics. These I'm not getting any commission for, or these I'm not an affiliate, but Liquitex is, I have used other acrylics and I like them, but Liquitex is my favorite brand. Like ever since I used them for the first time when I was in college, I've really enjoyed. If I know that I want some go-to paints, I stick with Liquitex. Anyway, the previous version was either areas where it was very dark or it was very primary colors. And I've been trying to shift towards a more muted, earthy palette. So I've been using burnt sienna, burnt umber, and yellow oxide. And as a side note and plus white, I also have white off to the side here. But as a side note, you know, people will usually try to use the primary colors of a red, a yellow, and a blue to make their mixes. If you want to have a muted version of that color palette, I realized I could just have the yellow oxide, which I just use this because the Liquitex, they were out of yellow ochre, and yellow oxide is close to that. It's a muted brownish yellow. But I realized that with burnt sienna, using this as my red, using yellow oxide as my yellow, and then I bought some Payne's gray, which I've never used before, but it's a blue gray. And between these, you have a muted red, yellow, and blue, a muted RGB palette. So this is something I actually want to experiment more in the future, because I'm not using any of the Payne's gray in the series that I'm showing you here, but this is something that I want to move into the future. Let me see. Oh, Amar mentions, I recently found out for 3 of these, it's called a triptych, and what you're doing is a quadric. And you know what? I've heard of triptychs before, and this was something I actually was mentioning, I think, in a previous live stream. I was trying to figure out what they called it for a 4. So a triptych, a quadtych. Yeah, it doesn't roll off the tongue well. Triptych does roll off the tongue well. Triptych, quadtych. Yeah, quadtych doesn't sound. It sounds weird. I'm gonna have to work on that one. I appreciate you dropping the knowledge. I'm gonna have to work on saying that. Yeah, but Amar also co-signs on Liquitex as well. Says that it's inexpensive. You know, it's an inexpensive brand. So quality, with consistent quality at an affordable price. That's what I say about the Liquitex. So anyway, for this particular piece that I'm doing, so I took these colors and I wanted to get a sense before I even started with painting the thumbnails. I want to get a sense of, if I want to get like an orangey color, what is it going to look like? So I started by just starting with a little bit of burnt sienna, and then I mixed a couple of these with white. So burnt sienna, and I put the ratios here. So I've got like a 1-to-1, like that's just burnt sienna. And then over here, I've got well, burnt sienna is here, and then I've got white. I mean, you can't really see it there, but there's a little swatch of white paint. And then here I've got burnt sienna with a 1-to-1. So 50% white, 50% burnt sienna, and then an even lighter, a 1-to-2 ratio. So I'm like writing the ratios over in the side here. And this gives sort of a very Caucasian skin palette, interestingly enough. So it's very easy to get flesh tones just with a little bit of burnt sienna and white, which is good because I'm going to start doing some African skin tone tests for doing some paintings in the future with characters of African descent. But as I go through here, I wanted to see, well, what happens if I mix like burnt sienna with white and a little yellow oxide. And then I wrote what the mixture is there. So that one's a little bit yellower. Then I've got some burnt umber with white at a 1-to-1. Because this is the main thing, is I was going to be using, you know, burnt sienna, yellow oxide. I don't have a swatch of burnt umber here, but this is just seeing, like, you know, all the colors I'm going to be using. I wanted to see how they mixed in like a ratio of 1-to-1, 1-to-2. So this one's giving me sort of an orangey brown, you know. This one gives me a pretty rich, almost full-on red. You know, all these different mixtures. So I'm just sort of mixing stuff around. And then, let's see here. Some more folks in the chat. I see Jay King is here. What's up, Jay King? Johnny's in the chat. How you doing? Thanks for rolling in here. So I'm just walking through my process in terms of doing traditional painting thumbnails. So these are in acrylic. So I started by just taking some of the colors and painting. And there's a reason why I do so many thumbnails. The reason why I do thumbnails is because I figure out what I want as I go along. This first one, I mostly just painted with burnt sienna. And well, this one I tried to start with all of these and do a mix. There's a little bit of burnt sienna in here. There's some burnt umber in terms of the earth tones, a little bit of white in here. And I felt like this was kind of all over the place. So then I realized, oh, wait, I need to take a step back and understand what my base colors are going to look like, how they're going to lay down. So the next step was I did the same composition. This is me painting the same thing 3 times, once purely in burnt sienna, once purely in yellow oxide, and once purely in burnt umber. And I'll tell you, the burnt umber really, like, I looked at this, I was like, wow, this could be it just on its own. But you got to push and go forward and see, you know, that's something I've been thinking about just in the terms of doing this process. And I'll get to that when I go, what should you know? I'll mention it now. One of the things I've been thinking about is that for pieces that I've completed and they just did not come out as well as I'd liked, I've realized that or even for the case of this painting, I went through and I said, I know that we talk about perfectionism, and I've said that perfectionism is bad, but what is good is to ask yourself, are you doing the best you're capable of? And I think for a lot of pieces, I went with the idea of minimum viable product, which is something that a lot of entrepreneurs and inventors talk about in terms of and for artists, getting the very basic version of your idea and getting it out to market. And then from there, iterating and improving. And I think that is a good way in terms of developing a business. But for making art, I've found that I have gotten a sketch that was a minimum viable sketch or a minimum viable thumbnail. And then I've gone forward into the painting. And what I've gotten is a painting that's a minimum viable painting. It's not a great painting. And unless I want to iterate and do multiple paintings, I need to go farther with my thumbnails. That's the thing that I'm going through now, is asking myself, is this just a minimum viable thumbnail, or is this sketch the best possible iteration of this idea? And that doesn't necessarily mean I shouldn't do multiple versions of a painting, because I have some ideas that I literally want to do 3 or 4 finished paintings that are variations on the exact same theme. Maybe it's color, maybe it's the way the skin is rendered, maybe it's the same piece, but I want to change some of the elements compositionally. I think that is a completely valid way to go, to have, like, if I'm doing a Medusa painting, have Medusa 1, Medusa 2, Medusa 3, and take them all to completion, because I think that's how you learn and grow. And also, sometimes you don't know which one is going to resonate with fans. You may have one that you think is awesome, that you love, and that one's just one people are kind of lukewarm. But one that you just dashed off might be like, oh, that's the one. That's hot. I know that dashing off makes it sound like I'm going, say, should just done the minimum viable product in the first place. But you don't know which one is going to be the one that's going to resonate with people. That's why you end up doing more of the work. Let's see here. Amar comments on the color there. And he says that 1 to 3 with a bit more white would work perfectly for albinos, if you have any albino characters. That's true. It is a very, like, this is definitely, like, not even albino, but if you were to go a little bit lighter, a little bit more white, like maybe a 1 to 4, it'd be kind of like an Irish skin palette, where, people living in Northern Europe with the very pale skin, almost milky. Because it's still not going to be as white as the paper. But, and that, again, that's the nice thing about doing these things, where it's something that you would, if we look at someone in real life, we say, oh my God, you look like a ghost. But when you see it on paper, you're like, no, it's still fairly dark. And, it's skin tones in general, for as much as we talk about people with a white skin or a dark skin, all of these skin tones are still relatively dark in relationship to the white of the paper. Let's see here. And Amen says, top right thumbnail looks lovely. Thank you very much. This was the one where I first realized, okay, I need to go through and do iterations. And the reason for doing the iterations is that I can look at these and say, all right, out of these different colors, which one is closest to this thumbnail that my wife liked? And out of these, I mean, honestly, the bottom one is my favorite. This one is the closest, but even this it's too dark and it's too red. So I had to say, all right, well, what's going to happen? How do I shift this to orange? And obviously you shift it to orange by having some yellow in it. Yellow and red equal orange. So I thought, okay, now we get to the next phase, the phase where I'm currently on. So I started this next phase by painting 2 thumbnails that were basically a replication of the yellow sienna one. I'll put it like this. It'll be easier to see. So what I did was, these 2 paintings right here started out as a replication of the yellow. And this one, I painted the yellow ochre, and then painted burnt sienna on it. And this one, I painted the yellow ochre. I mean, the yellow oxide, not yellow ochre, the yellow oxide, and then painted burnt umber over it. And out of these 2, the burnt sienna one gave me the more orangey feeling one. So this one feels like it's closer to what the thumbnail is. But it also occurred to me that I'm painting dark on top of light, which, usually that's something where it allows you to get progressively darker and lock in your colors and finalize them. But I was curious what would happen, particularly because I really loved this burnt umber one, what would happen if I painted a burnt umber piece and then painted lighter colors on top of it. So this one here, I painted it all in burnt umber and then added in some burnt sienna to add some orangey stuff on top. Not orangey stuff, but just adding in redder tones. And I will tell you that this, to me, feels like a winner in terms of a palette. And what I'm going to start with today is I'm going to go into painting this is the same piece. So both of these started out the same. And then I painted some yellow. I'm going to paint some yellow ochre on top and see how that looks. And just the fact that these two are kind of the same concept, where it's yellow ochre with burnt sienna on top, and then this is burnt umber with burnt sienna on top. You know, the difference for me seems like it's almost light day. Well, actually, these two are the ones that are really going to be similar because this is the burnt umber. But let's see here. Yeah, Amar says, I have an albino character. That's why I brought it up. And Byron says, context of color can really change everything. You know what? Very, very true. And there's something that James Gurney has been talking about in some of his videos lately, but I've really been leaning into the power of grays. There's also a really good Marco Bucci video on the relativity of color. Pardon me. Well, I'm slurping the last of my morning coffee. All right. I've really been leaning into the power of gray in the fact that gray is the great neutralizer. So if you're using warm colors and you add a gray, it will feel cool in relationship to it. So you don't actually have to add a blue into it or a cool color. Grays will cool a piece down without necessarily clashing unless you're going for a strong contrast. And also, you know, by the same token, if you're working with relatively cool colors, you've got purples, you've got violets and blues, and you put a gray in there, that gray is going to feel warmer than those colors because it is neutral, which means it is closer to warm than a cool color. So that's something I've also been really, it doesn't look like there's a lot of cool neutral in here, but I've been thinking about it a lot. I was thinking about it a lot when I was doing my digital thumbnails. So I haven't been using the grays as much here, but I got the Payne's gray I probably wouldn't use because the Payne's gray is a cool gray, but it's good to know. And Amar says very systematic, and he says that way is more thoughtful than how I would have approached it. But you have more experience with paint and real materials than I do. Well, you know what? First off, I appreciate you saying that. Part of this whole systematic approach comes from, like I always tell you, most of my stream is not about me handing down knowledge and wisdom and I'm teaching like all this experience I have. I learn by making mistakes, and that's why I always encourage you guys to make mistakes. I learned because I did a very large painting that I've spent 5 years working on and did it wrong. And now I'm thinking about all the things that I did wrong on that, and I'm trying to correct them. And when I was in college and I was painting in acrylics more often, and probably in my 20s, I probably would have done, I might not have done as many thumbnails as I did here, but I probably would have done maybe, like I said, four thumbnails in traditional paint. And it's me remembering, oh yeah, working all of this stuff out and knowing how the material is going to look will save me time when I'm at the canvas, because then I can just sort of go to. So that's why in terms of doing this, I'm also keeping little notes in terms of initials here of just what colors I used for which piece. And I'm trying to remember, I think that there was something else. Oh yeah. So before we get into the painting, I'm going to sketch out real quick one more dragon in here, because I wanted to try this piece right here. This third one is the one that I'm the happiest with, but I also feel like I went too dark with all of it. So what I want to do is I want to come back and try this one, but paint the dragon in significantly lighter. So I'll be thinning down my paint with water as I go instead of adding white. But in reality, when I'm really painting, I'm doing a lighter version of this. It's just going to be, you know, mixing it with white to lighten it as opposed to thinning it down. Because on a canvas, thinning it down with water, I don't think will really work that well. Point being is that after adding the yellow ochre paint on this one, then I'm going to come in and repaint this in a lighter palette, because this is what I think will look the most attractive. And then I'll have a conversation with the client and we'll see if they agree. This is a little bit weird for me because I'm drawing around the camera. This is my ongoing battle in terms of having a camera here, is if I have it close enough that you guys can really see what I'm doing, then it's really right in front of my face. And I went through that little experiment where I had a camera above me that could zoom, and that camera still wasn't giving me the resolution that I wanted. So I've just come to the realization that if I want to draw so you guys can see what I'm doing, I just have to have this close to my face. All right. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be drawing this dark enough for you to see a lot of what I'm doing here, because I really do need my guidelines to be very light to paint over it. So I don't know how much of this is going to come up on camera. So I'll try to draw quickly so you don't just look like, it doesn't just look like I'm doing, like, I don't know, pencil puppetry or some sort of mime show where I'm just running the pencil across the screen. Okay, so really when I start, the main thing I'm thinking about is just the focal point of the woman and the dragon, and having them in this diagonal opposition. This was one of the best things about restarting this piece, is that the composition really was not strong in the first iteration. This is so much better. Move this down a little bit. Just so I've got room to get the dragon's legs up there. I have to move her down and over a little bit. Yeah, this is pretty light. I don't know how much you guys are going to be able to. In fact, honestly, the camera might be making this worse. Not the camera, the lighting I have on here. If I turn off that light, you might be able to actually see the pencil marks. Got a little light attached, a little ring light right around the camera that I have here. But I realized that it's blowing this out too much. And if I were doing hard lines or something with high contrast, like if I were inking, it would look great. But for a pencil drawing, I think it's probably a bit too much and you really can't see what I'm doing. I do try to be aware of these things when I'm drawing for an audience. Let's see here. Yeah. Eneman says, yeah, I could hardly see a thing. Now it's better. The lines are very light, but I can still see them. Yeah, I'm going to try and speed through this so that you're not stuck in trying to decipher my my lines that much. And again, I mean, if you look at these other thumbnails I did, they're all, you know, I've drawn this composition multiple times now. They're all each one's fairly similar. Well, I mean, they're supposed to be similar. What I was trying to say is that they're not exact in terms of capturing capturing the composition. They get the main composition down, but each one, there'll be a little bit subtleties and shifts here. The main thing that really, really bothered me, and I thought long and hard about going back and wanting to restart this piece anyway, was that when I did the original, I think I've mentioned this, but I had drawn it so that the wings of the dragon were just sort of attached to a serpent. So it was like a winged snake, but I didn't give it any pectoral muscles that would be sufficient for the strength required. And I didn't give it any lat muscles. That's the thing that really bothered me. Like, a dragon needs big ass lat muscles, latissimus dorsi. They need big lats and big pecs to be able to move those giant ass wings. And I did not do that. And in looking at it, like every time I looked at the painting, the work in progress, the large canvas is in our living room. And every time I looked at it, once I realized that I had failed to put in those pec muscles and those lat muscles, I was just like, oh, like it killed me to look at that. And I was thinking, if any fantasy artists ever come over and they see that piece, they're just going to look at it and look at me and be like, sad, sad. So I'm trying to atone for my sins now. But let that be a lesson to you. If you're going to be doing dragons, give them big pec muscles and lat muscles. Think about how their anatomy is going to move those giant wings. Okay, I think that that's about enough here. All right, so I'll come back to this one. We'll see how we do with time. We're 30 minutes in here. But honestly, a lot of this painting, this is reminding me how much, doing these thumbnails reminded me how much I miss painting, and I need to bring it back, bring back painting into my traditional painting, into my creative process, because this just really invigorated me. And I'm like, wow, painting is fun. And like I said, I showed you just need like black, white, and like 2 or 3 colors. Like for me, the cyan, yellow, magenta palette that I was using, I get that from working in graphic design, where those are the main colors you're using. And with those color combinations, you can create anything. And so, really, as opposed to having a whole rainbow box full of colors, you can just have 5 colors and you can make everything. Well, 3 colors plus black and white. And a man says, true dragons don't skip chess day. They're definitely hitting the gym. All right, so I've got a palette here. And for those of you who are debating, I've never tried painting in oils, and I don't have anything against oils. It's more of the fact that when I started college, they taught us, we start with acrylics. That's all we ever learned. And then if you want to do oils, the instructor might work with you one-on-one. But they mainly taught acrylics because of the fumes, the ventilation issues, in terms of everyone breathing in a room, breathing in turpentine and all that. So I've just always worked with acrylics. A lot of people don't like how quickly acrylics dry, but I try to work as quickly as possible. So personally, I actually really like the fast drying of acrylics. But what I have here, this thing is called a Stay Wet Handy palette. It's by a company called Masterson's. And what this is, basically, it's a Tupperware container for paint. So if I pop this guy open, in the bottom, I have a piece of wax paper. Or actually, no, this isn't even wax paper. This is paper palette, although you could use wax paper. And just the only reason I'm not using wax paper is because it curls and it's kind of a pain in the ass. And I have a bunch of palette paper, but all palette paper really is just wax paper in sheets instead of rolls. So I put a sponge in here that's been moistened, and what that does is it keeps it humid inside there. And so this paint in here, these are the colors that I've been using: the yellow oxide, the burnt sienna, the burnt umber, and the white. And I've been using this paint for over a week now, and it's still wet. So that's the beauty of this palette. And what I do is I have a tiny spray bottle that I just have water in, and I just spritz that every few minutes. Now this is interesting, is I just realized, okay, so I've got my palette here. I'm trying to figure out where the best place to put it, because I don't want the palette to run while I'm working. Let's see here. Maybe I can use a little bit of silly putty, because I have some silly putty at the side of my desk that I use to hold my my inkwell for when I'm inking. And maybe I can put the silly putty under this this palette to keep it at a relatively flat angle. And it doesn't have to be. It's more of the fact that I've got a small table off to the side that I have all my art supplies on while I'm working. And I can just reach over, dip, and come back. What I really prefer if I'm painting is to have my palette right off camera, like it's right next to where I'm working. Let's see here. NMN says, have you considered using acrylic mediums that delay dry time? I believe propylene glycol has properties of keeping them wet for longer. I have considered it, but at the moment, I don't really need them because they stay wet enough while I'm using them. And with the Stay Wet palette, I can continue to work with them whenever I need them. And then in terms of drying on the material as I go, I'm fine with how quick they dry. So I know those things are out there, and I'm not against them, but I haven't needed them thus far. So, all right. So I'm going to try and make a little stand here and see if I can. We'll see how well this works. It may not work well at all. All right, I've kind of got it relatively level here. We've got a couple of brushes. So for this, I got to keep a paper towel in my hand as I go to dry stuff. So I've already pretty much I use a slightly larger brush when I'm originally blocking this in. When it comes to now doing the details, I'm just adding in these yellow highlights. This I can just come in with a smaller brush. Is another thing that I go back to a lot of James Gurney because I've been reading his color and light book, and I've watched a lot of his videos showing his painting technique. One of the things that I've seen him do a lot is he definitely recommends to work with as large a brush as possible for as long as possible. And I think in terms of this, if I were a little bit more practiced, I could probably do this phase of the painting with the large brush that I'm using. And when I say large, it's not large, but I'm using a flat 1/4 inch brush. I could probably do this phase of the painting with that as well. But I haven't really developed the level of control that I want yet. And because of that, I find it easier to just go in with the smaller brush. because my goal here is to more sort of like accent the brown. I'm not trying to paint yellow over everything. Although the nice thing is that I'm working with an opaque medium as opposed to the transparent medium of watercolor. I will tell you, I think I'm going to have to sit the palette off to the side here. I don't think that trying to do this the way I've got this here is going to work. So let me just adjust some of my material on this stand I have here to the side. That just means moving some paints, and I might as well finish off my coffee so I can move this off the table as well. All right. That's a little bit better. I think that I will have to figure something out if I want to work digitally. I mean, not work digitally. If I want to paint traditionally but live stream it, then I think I'm gonna have to work out a way to have my palette attached to my desktop, but to keep the palette, level as opposed to my drawing table is angled. And I could just lower my drawing table flat, but I really don't like working that way. So let's see here. NMM asks, do you sugar your coffee? He says, I know it's a question out of space, but I just kind of thought I'd ask. Yes, I use a flavored creamer. Coffee Mate creme brulee flavor. So, and it's got a fair amount of sugar in it. I think the tough thing here is getting just the right amount of pigment on the brush, because I don't really want to overpower this thing. I kind of want to glaze it on there. Almost like, in fact, I'll tell you, while I used acrylics in college, when I started getting back into the process of making personal art again, after college, I actually switched to watercolor just because watercolor is a super convenient, easy material to work with. It's affordable, it's easy, you can stretch it a long way, and it's good for working quickly. But like I said, my approach to color tends to be a little bit of a little ham-fisted. I'm probably overly primary bright colors. I don't really use enough muted stuff. And I found that I could not, like, it took me a long time to build up colors in watercolor to get colors that were as vivid and bright as I wanted. And I realized that if I switched back to, because I remembered my college days, and I said, oh, well, if I switch back to acrylics, maybe these will be, what, now that I'm painting again, let's see what happens if I throw the light back on. You guys let me know if the light blows this out too much. But I think now that I'm working in color again, the light will help. But when I started painting traditionally again, I found that I could simply use acrylics like watercolor. So I'd use them thinly and transparently when I needed very light colors and glazes and tints. And then when I wanted a very bold, solid color, I would ramp it up and I would just use like fully opaque, as little watering down as possible. So I kind of use acrylics as if it's a watercolor. Well, pretty much I use acrylics like wash, um, where it's more opaque and you can thin it down and mix it on the paper a little bit while it's wet, but it won't reactivate like watercolor does. And I do keep a set of watercolors around. In fact, a couple of sets for, like, let's say I go on a vacation or I'm traveling, or for some reason I have a reason to do painting away from home. Then watercolors are definitely my go-to for that, because all you need for cleanup is a bottle of water and some paper towels to wipe your brush off with. That definitely makes life a lot easier. And I think looking at this one, I like how the colors are coming out. But again, this one feels like it is too, the burnt umber that I did is too dark. So what I might do is, after I paint that second one that I'm going to do, I may paint, well, actually, no, it kind of makes sense. I should just paint two more of this one, but lighter, and then do the same thing again. So basically, I would duplicate both of these, but in a lighter key. Because that's the thing. I got so caught up in the drawing and painting of the dragon that I went a little bit too dark with my values. And that's something that I need to work on. And this is another one of those things that, the whole Jeremy does a zillion thumbnails process. That's the thing. I sometimes, even though the now at this point it's supposed to be really about color and the materials that I'm using, I'll come in and I'll say, oh wait, if I don't watch my values, I'll go too dark. And personally, I don't think that this is too dark for me, but I think it's too dark for what the client wants. So I'm going to give her options, and I'm going to show her this is how it looks like if I really pull back on the values and go for a higher key. And a note that I made to myself is that there's a bunch of, like, I've got they call them Kirby crackles, because I don't know if Jack Kirby invented them, but he's the one who made them famous. These energy crackles, where the energy is actually the white space, and the what appears to be the dots around them are not the energy. That's the space around the energy. It's actually the negative space. But I realized when I did the painting to the left here, this thumbnail, that I should have done those not in umber at all, but I should have just used the sienna. And that also holds true. That also holds true for for this piece that I'm doing now. So I should also do this one in where these little dots I'm putting in there. I should not do that in sienna at all, but just use the yellow oxide. Yeah, I think because I'm going to be painting duplicates in of the lighter version, the lighter value of burnt umber, I think I'm going to switch back to pencil after I finish this thumbnail, and I'm going to sketch a second thumbnail next to it so I can go ahead and paint those two duplicates at the same time. That's another thing that I find when I'm doing thumbnails is that I could have just done all this in, like, photocopied it. And that was something I originally thought, was to draw one pencil sketch and then photocopy it. and then paint a little bit of a acrylic medium over it to seal it, and then just paint my studies on top. But there's something I like about the idea of the multiple drawings to help me kind of refine the composition and think about things. Let's see. NMN says there's something weird in the Patreon link in the description. I clicked it, and it adds a weird slash at the end. Same with Instagram. All right, well, I'm going to go through all of my description links and see if I can figure out what's going on over there. Apologies to all of you if you've tried clicking on some links and they're not going to the right place. I'll get in there and check those out. In the meanwhile, if you go directly, if you just type into your browser, just patreon.com/Jeremy/GERIMI, that will definitely take you to the right link. So I don't know what's going on there, but I appreciate you letting me know on all of my links. I've had this before where the links were working fine, and then all of a sudden they started getting weird and corrupted. There was like adding characters to the links that weren't supposed to be there. And I'm not sure why that is. And it's very frustrating because I remember at one point I sat down and clicked through like 20 videos trying to find out, how many had bad links in them. Because obviously if people want to support me or buy my books or what have you, and they can't because the links aren't right, then that's bad for me. So I got to figure that out. But I'm glad you called it out. And for anyone else watching, if you ever see stuff on the video or links or stuff I mentioned and you click it and it's broken, definitely, if you're watching live, let me know. Or if someone's watching later on and they see something wrong, like in any of my videos, please leave a comment and say, hey, this thing is wrong or this thing is broken. I am not going to think you're complaining. I'm going to think you're helping me and trying to help me be a successful and productive artist and get my my business game right. So I appreciate you letting me know that. And I'm going to take a closer look, see if I can fix that. Okay. I will say that this definitely, it pops with the yellow more. And you definitely get more of a transition from, the burnt umber. That's the interesting thing. The burnt umber is still a warm color. I wish I had some Q-tips here because I just put down a mark that I didn't want. Let me get in here. This happens sometimes. You put a little paint down, you're like, oh, I don't want that. You know what? Honestly, you can just go in there, and as long as it's not on top of something that's already wet, you can go into a painting, and if you put a mark down, just dab it out. Obviously not to the level that you can do like with acrylics. You can just go in there and scrub, and really get rid of something. But, sometimes I'll make a line and I'm not happy with it. And if it's dry, then you got to paint over it. But if it's wet, you can just come in there and just kind of scoop it out. I'm just putting little lines in here to kind of accentuate the underside, since the light I've got is coming kind of from below and from around the figure, the dragon, rather. All right. So let me turn off this ring light again and switch back to pencil and do that second sketch real quick. Okay. So this is the less exciting part of the process where I'm literally just drawing the same thing twice. And until I add in the accent colors, it's even going to be me painting the same thing twice. But I think that there's something about this that also helps build your skills in terms of managing the medium, the material. Like if you're somebody, lots of people are like, well, I'm intimidated by painting. I'm afraid to paint. I don't know how to paint. Um, the way you learn to paint is by doing a ton of paintings. And you can just say, all right, well, I'm doing one painting, but I'm going to do the one painting a bunch of times. Like each time I make one of these small little paintings, I learn a little bit more about how to handle acrylics. And mind you, that was my major in college. I was a fine art major with a focus in drawing and painting. And the painting was all acrylic painting. So even though I studied this, and in theory I should be very good at it, having not done it in such a long time, I'm gonna put her a little bit lower just to really enforce that sense of scale with the dragon. My point being is that, just on this sheet alone, this is going to be 6 tiny acrylic paintings that I've done. Never mind the other sheet of paintings as well. So if you're intimidated by whether it's oil painting, watercolor, acrylic, it doesn't really matter what the medium is. This is how you learn to paint. You do a little sketch, you slap paint on it, you see what works and what doesn't. You can watch a lot of videos about painting theory and about you can watch videos about color theory. You can watch about techniques for how to move the paint on your canvas, or in this case, I'm painting on Bristol board. And you can learn a lot. I'm not telling you that those videos are useless. They're very useful. And sometimes I'll look at videos to get tips from other artists. But in the end, the way that you learn to do something like this, like painting or inking, if you're working in comics or just want to work with ink, the way you learn is by taking one particular concept, one project, one image, and saying, all right, well, I'm going to do a variation and I'm going to see how it looks. I'm going to do another variation. I'm going to see how it looks. And mind you, all of these, I'm doing this on is A4 the size that's close to like American US letter paper? Anyway, the material I'm working on is 9 inches by 12 inches. So it's, bigger than A4, but not huge. And on that, obviously you can see I can fit 8 thumbnail paintings on this. Like if you look, this is literally how big these paintings are. Here is my hand. So each painting is smaller than my palm because my knuckles go all the way up to there. So yeah, each painting can fit inside the palm of my hand. That's how big these paintings are. In fact, I've got my phone here next to me. So let's see here. You can see phone versus painting. The paintings are smaller, definitely smaller than the size of a phone. So if you were to look at an image of this on Instagram and I had it cropped, it would be pretty close to, if it took up the whole size of the phone, the whole width of the phone, you'd be like, it'd be pretty close to actual size if you were to look at this on a phone. I don't know if that information about the scale is useful or interesting to you guys, but I just thought I'd share it because sometimes when I work on this, particularly when I'm zoomed in, it might be kind of hard to, even though you see my hand in the picture, it might be kind of hard to figure out the relationship between them. Let's see here. Oh, Byron mentions about the links. He says it fixes itself if you add the slash at the end, even though it will change the URL to one without the slash at the end. It'll work. All right. Well, that's good to know. I'm still gonna have to go in there and figure out why it is that it's adding these odd symbols at the end. You know what? I think I do know why. I think it's because sometimes when I cut and paste these, there may be a return character in the file when I'm pasting it, because I'm pasting it from a sticky document that I have on the side. And I see Jay King has to take off. Says back to work. Thank you, brother and people. Thank you for joining us. It was good times. I'm probably gonna, we're already at about an hour here, and I'm gonna probably go for an extra half hour and just see, like, we'll see where we are in 30 minutes, because at least I'll have made some progress on the the paintings. It's going to take me another few minutes to draw this second sketch. And then we'll see where I am time-wise. But I think we'll probably be good to wrap up in about 30 minutes here. So we're going for a little bit longer today. Just when you thought you were rid of me. Okay, see, I keep moving this piece of rock up because compositionally I want it higher. And then I keep remembering that if I want to really get the sense of the dragon's thigh, I need to move this down, and I need to put enough space in here because I could have it overlap, but I feel like, you know what, let's just try it and see how it looks. I wanted to not have it overlap because this is going to be like a flat, dark silhouette. And I wanted to have the silhouette of the dragon read very strongly. So far, in none of my thumbnails have I let this piece overlap. But I'm going to do it now, and we'll just see how it goes. This is another one of those things where doing multiple thumbnails, I try different stuff with each one and see if I maybe discover something that I want to carry over into the finished piece. Okay, moving up and up and up. This wing goes up, up. And I've been sort of futzing around because trying to get the wings to feel like they are going not just outward but upward as well, to give you that sense that you're looking up at the dragon. But that also makes it a little bit awkward for where I place the dragon's head. They're trying to place it so that the wing that it's covering, the left wing, compositionally, I try to make it so it's going to the center of the dragon's head, so I don't have to really worry about tangents. Or at least it reduces the risk of putting unintentional tangents in there by having that line of the wing go directly into the center of another mass. Just a little compositional thing that I'm thinking of. And I think years from now, when I am a master of composition, or when I've mastered my storytelling and my materials, like when I can draw whatever I can imagine, like skill wise, then I'm probably going to want to experiment with trying to play with tangents, trying to intentionally put tangents in work just to see if I can use it instead of it, because tangents are considered a bad thing. They're distracting. It's poor overlap. But I'm sure that there are artists who have used tangents to intentional effect. But you really have to know your shit to do stuff like that. So that's something that that's one of those where you get so good at the material that now it's kind of a game of formalism where you're playing with what you can do with the material or what people say you should or shouldn't do. Like you're intentionally transgressing ideas that they say, well, that's bad picture making. And then you try to find a way to say, all right, yeah, I know that's bad picture making. I'm going to try and make a good picture full of tangents. And who knows, it might be a fool's errand. It might be stupid to try that, but that's the kind of things where I think about, like, that's the kind of stuff for me when I think about formalism, playing where it's less about the content, it's more about what you're doing with the art form, or just playing with pushing the boundaries of what you can do with the paint or the drawing or the composition. Um, and sometimes I think it's interesting to set a goal and to say, as an experiment, I'm going to try to do something that is going to fail. Because trying to make a picture with intentional tangents sounds like it is right to fail. It sounds like that's just like most people would say, well, why? And I'm like, because I want to see if I learn anything by doing something that's just built to fail. And I wonder why I'm not doing my art full time. Well, I tend to be a bit of a contrarian. People say go left, I go right. People say zig, I zag. So this one, I'm going to make the same notes I did on the other one, where it's going to be burnt umber with burnt sienna. And I just write BU for burnt umber. Don't put in a light. Then burnt sienna. This will be burnt umber light. In yellow oxide YO. So, and I'll tell you, I can already say that this drawing, the fact that you guys can see clearly, or I don't know how clearly you can see, but you can tell even from this camera, even if you can't see the composition that well, that this is definitely darker than that. I almost feel like I should go in here and pull out a little bit. My little kneaded eraser is covered in cat fur. We have 2 cats, and their fur is in everything. Yep, that's a good point there. Byron chimed in. He says, you'll learn more from failing anyway. Yes, yes. Failure is the great educator. The real challenge is to fail with as little cost as possible. And that is something, in terms of the whole minimum viable product, I neglected to come to its defense with the expression of fail fast, fail cheap, fail often. They do say to come up with a minimum viable product, but they also say to iterate rapidly. Iterate, and to be fair, that is what I'm doing here. I'm iterating rapidly. And to say that to fail fast, fail cheap, fast meaning you don't spend a lot of time with your failures. You fail, you try, you learn something, and you take that and immediately plug it back in. The same way you reinvest your profits. If you have a business and you make profits and you reinvest that in the business, you try an experiment and you reinvest your failure. You look at what you learned from your failure and jump back in quickly and say, all right, let me do this where I adjust that and improve on that. You don't spend a lot of money on it. You don't spend a lot of time on it. And you do it. You continue to do it. You do it all the time. So in a way, I'm kind of doing that with the thumbnails. That's the interesting thing. In one world, you can look at me doing a ton of thumbnails as perfectionism. On the other way, you can look at it as me taking the entrepreneurial fail fast, fail cheap, fail often. Like I'm iterating a bunch of times to get to what I hope will be a rock solid finished painting. All right, so I just used the kneaded eraser, and instead of rubbing, I just sort of rolled it on to pull off some of the pigment. So this is much lighter now. You really can't see it as well. Like it just looks probably like I'm looking at the camera that you guys are seeing on the monitor, and it just looks like smears and smudges. But that's fine because I'm going to turn the light back on, and now I'm going to come in here and let me wet down my paints again. And I did notice as I was painting these, you know what I should do? This is what I should do. Let me see if I have a way to clip this. Can I clip this to something? This might work. So I've got another drawing board here. If I can clip this to this drawing board and raise this up so you guys can see what I'm doing. Or maybe, let's try reversing it. Nah, it's not going to work. What I want is to get this raised up high enough for you guys to see it, and then I can actually use my hand. See here. Byron says the fur will add extra texture to the final piece. That's what I keep telling myself. Okay. What I'm trying to do here is raise this up high enough so that you guys can see it while I work. And then instead of going back and forth to the palette, I can hold the palette in my hand while I paint. Oh, that's what I can do. Fortunately, I'm the king of a zillion binder clips. I can clip this on the side out of the way. And now I can just hold the palette level just below the screen, the way that I like to work, where I've got the palette in my hand and I can just sort of go back and forth, back and forth. And I did notice, you may not be able to see this, but there's a little bit of fur. That little hairline in there, that's fur in my palette. I did notice that the yellow oxide actually dries faster than the other colors. The burnt sienna, well, actually, the burnt umber is the one that I have the most pigment on here of. And so that's probably another reason why it's taking longer to dry, is just because there's a lot of it. But it's interesting just seeing how the different colors, they're all, drying slower inside this palette. But it's interesting to see how they all are drying not consistently slower. So what I am doing is I am just recreating what was in the thumbnail that's up there, but I'm trying to do it in a lighter value. And I'm repeating what I said earlier, just for the benefit of just kind of recapping and explaining my thought process here, which is, I'm using it thinned down as opposed to adding white to it. And that might actually be, this might also be another learning experience. I might realize, oh, wait, me thinning it down and trying to see how that looks is a bad idea in comparison to me just adding white paint and really painting the values, because I'm not going to use water when I'm working on canvas. So I may end up doing these two paintings and then do one more thumbnail, but do it where instead of thinning down the acrylic to use it like it's watercolor, I may come in and do it with white, so that the entire painting is opaque, because I'm going to be painting opaque when I do the real version, final version. I'm going to have to give this brush a proper cleaning, because it's a very nice brush, but I might not be able to save it, but the hairs are splitting in terms of it's not giving me a solid flat, because I have not been good at maintaining and cleaning it. Cleaning brushes when you're using, ink and watercolor is a lot easier. With acrylics, yeah, this stuff wants to harden like stone. You know what? I'm gonna turn off the light again. I think that in this case, with trying to work at a higher key, that light is really not helping, because much like the pencil lines are very light, so you can't see what I'm doing. I'm painting with much lighter value than I did the first time. And because of that, it's going to be hard for you to see. The only thing that I'm going to make really dark is the are those the rocks in the foreground and the silhouette of this woman sitting on the stone. But this is what I was saying before about like the painting with a wider brush. In a lot of the James Gurney videos, he would use something probably even wider than what I'm using now. But his whole point was to try to cover a lot of material, to cover a lot of surface area with a relatively broad brush, because it keeps you from focusing on the details too much too soon. And when you do decide to put details in there, it's more intentional, because you can really noodle on a painting and just put stuff in there and just paint detail, like get lost in the details, kind of like when you're drawing like a really cool muscly figure, a superhero character, and you're just drawing all of these muscles. You're not even necessarily paying attention to the fact of, well, is this figure volumetrically sound? Does it feel like a three-dimensional figure? Are the proportions correct? Is the gesture dynamic? Is it doing all of the things that you need the piece to do before you get so caught up in the excitement of rendering details? And that's something that I'm concerned about. Not super concerned, but it's a problem that most artists, I think, at some point they have to struggle with it. And I'm at the phase where I'm aware enough of the idea of getting lost in detail that I try not to. But I haven't been. I still, it's enough of a problem that I have to consciously say, "Whoa, slow down, back off on the detail here." So I'm going to go ahead and go full opaque on the rocks. Even with this, I'm going to have to put on a couple of good coats here. I mean, I kind of thought I would come in here and just like using a marker, just a big swath of black. But I remember now when I was doing the other ones, when you first apply it, unless you have like gobs and gobs of it on your brush, it still comes out fairly thin. And that's one of the reasons, again, why I like Liquitex. Um, I know that they have like a professional grade. These are just their basics, but they also have like a professional grade. And I'm not sure if it's Liquitex or another company, but there's companies that make a paint that's called full body, where it's really thick and it's meant to be slathered on. So when you use it, it's super solid. But the basics, they work well for me in that Like I mentioned, the whole idea of glazing, which is just layering on colors as opposed to just putting on a single color or even mixing them on your palette, but to paint one color and then change the nature of that color by painting a very thin layer of a different color on top of it. That, liquid text basics work pretty well for glazing, at least in my experience. And again, a little trick, you know, for all the times I'm going to shout out James Gurney on this. When he does talk about painting with a larger brush and trying to use a large brush for as long as possible to keep from getting lost in the details. A cool thing is when he has to start suggesting details, but he's not ready to go to a smaller brush, then he will just take a brush. He'll take his large brush and he'll just use the corner or the edge. You just take this brush and flip it on its side, and now you can you can make lines. It's very, very simple. And I will tell you that well, I did go to a good art school. It was not an illustration school. They were very much more into. We've had this conversation. They were much more into conceptual art and the contemporary art gallery scene. These are the kinds of valuable art tools or art tips that I really would have appreciated in college and didn't get. Most of this stuff was learned, either by friends that I know, watching them work over time, learning from other artists. And this in this internet age of everyone sharing their work online, that's why I keep mentioning the James Gurney channel, because there's definitely stuff that I learned from him, from watching his videos. And I learned from a lot of contemporary artists and illustrators. I was trying to, I'm trying to walk that balance between looking at what other people are doing and seeing where I can incorporate it and add it, but also not reinventing my workflow every 6 months, which is something my buddy Carl Altstetter rightfully laid the accusation at my feet. That's like, dude, you're constantly like you're making your process more elaborate and more elaborate instead of just mastering one thing. And even now with the fact that I mentioned that after finishing Morningstar, I'm gonna try doing my next comic book fully digitally, and I want to do it just to see what it's like. Although I will tell you, just the fact that I'm sitting down doing painting makes me want to do a painted comic. So yeah, I realize that for all the things that I say, oh, I realize this flaw and I'm working on it. The whole constantly tweaking my workflow, that is something that's still a problem for me. And I could put my foot down and say, no, I'm just going to do my art one way, period, for like a decade. But hell, I did Morningstar pretty much the same way, except for switching to my layouts digitally, and that took me a decade. So I think I did kind of stick to one workflow for a long period of time, and now I'm just trying different stuff. Now here, this is the part that is difficult. How much do I add to darken? Because I definitely went too dark on the first versions, but I don't want to go. I still want there to be some contrast. I don't want to go too dark, but I do want a little bit more contrast than this, basically this washed out silhouette. Let's see here. Cassiel is up in here. He says, from the ashes, Cassie Da Vinci. Good to see you back, man. Thanks for rolling in. See, Byron says, I can't mess with full body acrylics. They activate the inner kindergartner in me and I have the urge to eat them. Yeah, they do have a very creamy, fruity, like It's like getting a thing of pudding or yogurt and they just look delicious. But yeah, don't eat your paints. If I can share one public service message to all of you out there, don't eat your paints. At best, they will make you say insane. At worst, they will just kill you. Don't eat paint. Just don't. Let's see here. NM says about the art school, I've had the same stuff, conceptual stuff. Illustrations was a no-no. Um, it's not that illustration was a no-no. They just didn't teach it at my school. And that's one of the things I've said, and I've actually tried to encourage younger students and people that are in art school now is to ask their instructors to teach them the things they want to know. Because if I had simply gone to my instructors and said, I'm interested in academic art and illustration, I want to learn these other crafts, they would have taken me aside and said, okay, look at these books, do these kinds of studies. They would have known how to teach me that. It's just that that's not what was being pushed in the curriculum then. But they will teach you what, if the teachers know it, they'll teach it. And they would have been happy to do so. But that's the thing. As a young person, I think a lot of times I can remember my college age self, and I didn't realize that if I wasn't getting things I needed in my education, that I could go to the instructors and say, hey, I need this thing that I'm not getting. Can you teach me this skill? And I think that's an important thing to tell young people that are in art school or in any educational school now is just simply go to their instructors and say, I want to learn this particular technique or this craft. Can you help me? And they'll either teach you or they'll point you to the right resources. I've said I got to do an independent study with a professor who wasn't even, I'd never taken a class with, but I just needed an instructor to do an independent study with. And so I went out, reached out to her, said, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'd like to do. And she just met with me, I don't know, once a week or once every other week for the whole semester. And at the end, I turned in, like I was working on that was really what it was. I was working on a comic book for an independent, for publisher, for a small studio. And I told her, hey, I'm working on this. I'd like to just do this as an independent study. She's like, yeah, that's fine. So I was able to turn in a comic book that I was, working on that was going to get published as a school program. That was pretty cool. NMN says a decade. How long did it take you to make Morningstar, if I may? That's the decade I was talking about. It took me a decade to do Morningstar. I started 2012, I want to say. So, and I just finished it in I guess I finished inking it in 2000, maybe it was 2001 when I finished inking the final issue. So maybe 8 years. Okay, so maybe not a decade, but also I've been doing a lot of sketching and thumbnailing for it, and I only got it published. Like I just got the final copies like this week, the final for sale copies. So if you take from the time I started to having the final published conclusion in my hands in a collected trade, that was that was 9 years at least. And then if you don't count, that's not necessarily counting the all of the time I was doing the development before 2012. Like I was doing a bunch of thumbnail sketches. And I'm gonna get on the internet, on the internet Wayback Machine, and I'm gonna see if I can find the very early version of Morningstar that I did in back in college in the 1990s. I did a very early version of Morningstar, a very different short story, but I have the pages. I just don't feel like scanning them in. If I can't find them anywhere, I will eventually scan them in and make them available for you guys. But it occurred to me that I can just look up and see if I can find my old GeoCities page. And if I can find that, I was doing webcomics before webcomics were a thing. If I can find my old GeoCities page, I will post that in the community section, the posts, and I'll share that early version of Morningstar. And if not, I'll eventually scan in that old college version. I think it goes without saying that it was very, very bad, but I am still willing to share it with you guys. So let's see here. Yeah, I'm still just very carefully trying to slowly darken this piece. I don't want to go full bore with the. I don't want it to be as dark as the other versions. And that's the real challenge for me at this stage, is just figuring out how dark it should be, how dark the muscle should be, how dark the tones and the values and the masses should be on the dragon in comparison to the other one. The other one that the other thumbnail that I did. Sometimes thinking and painting at the same time become challenging. Let's see here. A couple of comments there. Let's see. Amar says to have an acrylic or oil painted comic would be a cool collector's piece. Well, I mean, I remember I read a lot of comics in the 90s, the early 90s, because the late 90s gets a bad rap. People talk about like the era. Some people, I mean, Image puts out a lot of great comics now, and a lot of people talk about the Image era as being the early Image era as being a bad sign of comics. And true, there was that crash in terms of the 90s. There was an indie crash after the Image boom, but there were a lot of great books coming out from the 90s. And in the early 90s and late 80s, there's a lot of innovative stuff. There's a lot of painted comics coming out. Actually, if you want to go a little bit earlier into the 80s, like, I discovered there's stuff like there's a painter called Scott Hampton who did a lot of Scott and Bo Hampton, both comic creators. I think they're brothers. I don't know for sure, but they did a lot of painted comics. I think Scott Hampton did a great painted Batman story about child abduction. I think it was called Night Terrors or something like that. Pretty heavy and something that was appropriate to be painted. Of course, there's Bill Sienkiewicz with all of his work on Elektra Assassin, his own comic book Straight Toasters. Let me see, I'm trying to think of who are some other painters, comic book painters that I was reading back then. There is John J. Muth, who now I think primarily does children's book illustration, but he did a great series with J.M. DeMatteis, or DeMatteis. I forget how to pronounce his name. But anyway, Moonshadow is a great fantasy comic book. Kent Williams is one of my favorite comic book painters. And he did this amazing series called Havoc Wolverine Meltdown, which was written by Louise Simonson. It might have been co-written with Louise and Walt Simonson. But Louise Simonson, I think, is the main writer on it. And it's almost like a Quentin Tarantino X-Men comic. It's Wolverine and Havoc are out on a vacation. They're just getting away from all of the craziness of being superheroes, and it's during a time when the world thinks that they're dead. But none of the other X-Men are in it. It's just Wolverine and Havoc, and they're in Mexico, and they have a bet that the first person who has to use their powers during the trip ends up will have to buy the beer for the rest of the vacation. And the whole point is that they don't want to use their powers. They actually don't want to get into trouble. But they're X-Men. Trouble finds them. And the interesting thing is, I'd mentioned John J. Muth. The book goes back and forth. No, it's not even back and forth. The entire series is painted. I think every page is painted by both of them. But what they do is, I believe that Kent Williams paints all of the Wolverines and John J. Muth paints all of the Havocs. And I don't know how they broke up the backgrounds and environments. But yeah, they basically painted a comic book together. And it is a beautiful looking book. It's a fun, pulpy story. It's not what I would call it's not about being like a deep world changing, like God Loves, Man Kills. It's a fun painted superhero comic, and it feels very experimental. In fact, I don't know, but from memory, but it may have come out through Marvel's Epic line. But I highly recommend it. It's very well written. It's visually beautiful. Definitely worth checking out. Point being, a lot of painted comics. Even before now, we've had people digitally painting stuff, but a lot of traditional painted comics that kind of became my thing for a while. And I feel bad that I'm not remembering more painted comics. I mean, there's Simon Beasley, definitely the Bees. He does and continues to do a lot of great painted work. Glenn Fabry does a lot of painted covers. I don't know if he did very many painted interior comics. I want to say that I saw like maybe a Slain comic reprinted in Heavy Metal a long time ago. Let's see here. Cassiel mentions Tahiko Inui, which I'm probably butchering that name. He says uses ink and brush and uses watercolor too. He says, I like it. It's very beautiful to see. I'll tell you, Masamune Shiro from Appleseed, I can't speak to all of his works, but specifically in Appleseed and Ghost in the Shell, in each one of those, he would do like at the beginning of each chapter, or what would be the equivalent of an issue, he would do a painted area where it was like a 6 or 8 page segment that was painted before going into the rest of the issue that was in black and white. And I'm not sure how that looked when it was originally being serialized in terms of like, was it like part of a color insert? I don't know how much of it was him doing it as an artistic expression and how much of it was in the original format when it was published. There was an opportunity to do a painted section, and it was kind of like you have to do this, like Sunday strips being in color, because just with the weekly manga being published, I'm not sure how color played in to those original printings of those books. But that said, in the collected editions, they have it where at the beginning of each issue you can see the color pieces, and they look like watercolor to me. Could be gouache, but I don't know for sure. But they're definitely fantastic, and it's great to see Shiro's color work. And in fact, I think when I finish this, I'm gonna go look at those just to, I don't know, just to get me hyped for artistic hype. That's the other thing. Like, you know what? People talk about how do I get over artistic block or writer's block. I'll tell you, I'm not feeling a block right now, but just going and looking at work from your favorite artist, that will do it. At least for me, if I'm feeling like I'm feeling like I am not in the mood to make art, I just go look at art that I love, and that does it for me. So I've mentioned it before, but that's my ongoing writer's block tip, is just go look at art that you love. That does it. Let's see here. NM mentions in terms of the let's see here. He says, in terms of working on Morningstar for a decade, he says, holy cow, such dedication. Well, I mean, we talk about this thing about being dedicated and sticking with something. It's like, I enjoy doing it. If I didn't work, if I wasn't working on Morningstar, I'd be working on some other comic book. And it doesn't mean, I mean, I actually intentionally do want to start doing shorter works, so I'm not doing the same project for a decade. But, if I'm not drawing that, I'm going to be drawing something else. I just, it's not, for me, it doesn't seem like it's about dedication. It's about spending my days doing something that I enjoy, whether it's a long story or a short story. And I definitely recommend to all of you, do shorter stories. I enjoy doing the long story, but do shorter stories. Let's see here. Byron mentions Takahiko Inui is one of my inspirations, probably my favorite mangaka art-wise. Kentaro Miura is up there too. May he rest in peace. I am familiar with Kentaro Miura, but I don't think I've read either of their works. I will make it a point to look them up and check out the artwork. I am not up on contemporary manga. Hell, the stuff I'm reading right now, I'm going through. I have like 10 Will Eisner graphic novels. I've only read 5 of them. So, and one day I was looking at my bookshelf. I'm like, how insane is it that I own graphic novels by Will Eisner and I haven't read them yet? But that's what I do a lot of times. I'll just see a book and I know that I want to read it. I just don't have the time to read it. Now, if it's something I think it'll be hard for me to find later, I'll just pick it up. And that's how I end up with like hundreds and hundreds of books that I have not read yet. So, so sometimes a lot of stuff like manga kind of, it's not that I dislike manga or I'm not interested. It's just that most of the manga that I'm familiar with is like manga from the 90s. That's most of the stuff I'm familiar with. It's just I haven't had time to keep up with current manga. I know One Piece is awesome. Everyone loves One Piece. Everyone loves One Punch Man. Everyone loves Attack on Titan. There's tons of great stuff out there. And I do have friends recommending me work all the time, like you guys. But I don't read that stuff as much as I do the older stuff that I own and just haven't gotten around to reading. Let's see here. NMN says, I Googled Scott Hampton's art. Holy shit, it's awesome. Yes, it is. He's definitely worth checking out. In fact, I want to go look at his website because I want to see what he's doing recently. Because again, he's somebody who I got into his work in the 90s. I've only read a handful of it. So I don't know what he's been working on lately. And I want to check it out. Let's see here. Okay, we've got a recommendation for a Polish artist living in Belgium. NMN says, if you guys want painted comics, Google Gregor Rosinski. He says he's a Poland-born comic book artist who lives in Belgium. His Thorogal series are awesome. I will check that out. Definitely. Let's see here. Oh, I'm scrolling up a couple of comments there. Byron says, GeoCity, stop making me feel old. I'm not even that old, but I remember that. If you remember that, then you old. Let's see. Cassiel says, well, this chat and this channel is very underground and underrated. I appreciate that. Well, you know what I always tell you guys? If you enjoy the videos, share them with somebody you think would like it. Definitely, like, share, subscribe, comment on the videos. All those things help getting the word out to other people. I think the problem is that all of us that are hanging out here are all like, we're who we would send it to. We're hanging out because we're enjoying talking about this stuff. So we're into it. And I think all of us, we don't necessarily have other people that we would share this kind of content with, which is kind of why we're all bonding with each other. So that does make it kind of hard. We've kind of created a closed loop in here. But you know what? There are others out there who would enjoy this, who haven't seen the videos. So if you ever come across them, please send them a link. It definitely helps. Let's see. NMN says, I remember everyone having Yahoo Mail and chatting through IRC. He says, nostalgia kicketh inneth, it seems. Let's see here. Yeah, Cassiel says, anyone read Sandman? It's good. And Byron says, yeah. I will tell you, for Sandman, my favorite volume of the entire series is the second or third volume, Season of Mists. If you're going to start with Sandman, you can start with the beginning, and I think the beginning volume is good. But for me, I feel like Seasons of Mist really gives you a sense of what the whole series feels like, because it's much more mythology driven than the opening channel starts off before Vertigo existed. So you're really getting a sense of sort of like his place inside they use a villain from the main DC universe because it's before Vertigo comics existed. See, the volume Season of Mists really, to me, gives you a sense of what, if you read that and you like it, then you'll like all of Sandman. So I would definitely recommend that. But yes, it is a good series, but it's also not necessarily to everyone's taste because it's very literary and character driven. I mean, it has a great plot, but at the same time, it does a good job of being both a literary with a capital L work, while also being a fun fantasy story. Well, not necessarily fun. Some of the stories are pretty damn dark, but an excellent fantasy story. Well, I'll tell you that we're past an hour and a half here. And I think that I still have to do a whole second duplicate of this and then paint the other tones on top of it. I'm working pretty slow because I have to be thoughtful about this. And I will tell you, as much as I try to have all of my creative process up front so you guys can see what I'm doing and why and be transparent, I think that this is one of those things where I need to focus, and this to get the values, to figure out exactly how dark I want the values to go. I think I might need my full brain and not be talking while I'm doing it. I'm not going to record for later, but this is the kind of thing that maybe in the future when I'm doing stuff like this, I'll make time lapses of it, because this is one of those things where it'd probably be easier to do a time lapse of and then share later. Because in order to do it correctly, I really need to be thinking 100% about the piece the whole time. And for the most part, when I'm talking with you guys, I'm really just kind of like, I'm not half-assing it, but I'm a little bit on autopilot in terms of the art making, and then just more engaging and talking with you guys. It's a lot more like the environment I've tried to create, which is we're all kind of hanging out in the studio, chit-chatting while we're working. That said, let me go ahead and dry off my brushes and cover up my palette. I'm going to take a quick look at any final comments in the chat and maybe answer those, and then we're gonna wrap it up for today. So let me cover this. But I will keep you guys posted in terms of where I end up. If I'm not working on this, if I'm done with all of this next week's live stream, then I'll be back to some other illustration work, but I'll continue to post updates on the actual painting as I go, because that painting I'm doing out in the living room. I can't set it up to live stream out there while I'm working. Plus, we kind of disrupt the rest of the house. So let me get in here and take a look at the rest of the comments here. And let's see here. Byron mentions the vast majority of manga is black and white. Sometimes you'll have colored pages and centerfolds. Most colored pages would be done with watercolor or alcohol marker. Oh yeah, in terms of the conversation about the Masamune Shiro stuff. And John's like, still live. Nice. Yeah, we decided to go long here today because painting takes a little bit more time, and I want you guys to see more of what I was doing and why. Now it's interesting. Byron says we're who we would send it to, and he says I can't even disagree with you on that. Not many people appreciate cartooning, comic making in my circles except for myself. Yeah, I've got like a few other art friends, and they're I've had them on as guests. I've had Carl Altseder on here. I've had Jesse Toves on, Dan Plagle. There's a bunch of other friends of mine who I have not had on that I should have on. More people, from my buddy Vince Moore. Those are friends, like my personal friends that I've had on. But comics and artwork is what brought us together. So those are the people that I mostly have had on. Yeah, there's not necessarily, I think a lot of people enjoy fandom, and I encourage people to enjoy fandom and just to fan out about their favorite characters, their favorite movies, and all of that, and what's going on with Batman or Superman this week, or big dramatic twists or crossovers. I don't think there are as many people that are really interested in the deep dive in the creative process. And then when you get into that, there's also the people who they might be interested in watching someone draw a cool image, like watching Jim Lee's Twitch stream. But they aren't necessarily interested in how you develop the skills to be able to do that, because that's the hard work. And a lot of people think that's the boring work. I don't think it's the boring work, but that's why I do these videos, because I'm interested in learning and developing the craft, and I nerd out about that shit. There's a much smaller population of people who are interested in the actual work it takes to develop the skills to make comics and animation and and fantasy art. Yeah. So let's see here. Cassiel says, I see that in YouTube, analog horror is becoming popular, like the Mandala catalog, the Walter Files, or even the Backrooms and Liminal Spaces. He says, anyone notice that they hide the amount of dislikes? I didn't notice that, but to be honest, I don't care. In the words of my buddy Scott Circlin, haters gonna hate, creators create. He's got a great shirt of that, by the way. So if you go to circworks.com, you can pick up that shirt. That's one of his great sayings. I don't really worry about the dislikes. I just worry about the people. You got to worry about the people that are down with what you're doing, because there's always going to be people that are going to dislike what you're doing or discourage or be naysayers. You can't focus on them. You got to focus on the people that love what you're doing, and then try to find more of those people. And just that's how I roll. Yeah, but Byron says they decided to hide dislikes about a week ago back, and NMN says there's a whole bunch of videos where they're expressing their dislike towards a subject, pun intended, and coming up with theories. And he says, so why they hide? So why they hide? The real reason. Let's see here. Oh, Amar was doing a on his Blender series. He says, when I'm done updating that scene, I'll share the results with you. I look forward to seeing it. Let's see here. And Amar says, thanks again for the stream. You are very, very welcome. Thanks for hanging out. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, Cassiel says it's stupid to hide the dislikes. I don't even see a good argument in that. There's so many other things I'd rather put my mental energy towards than trying to figure out why they're doing what they're doing. I don't care one way or the other. Let's see here. NMN says, I heard from several sources that YouTube's official explanation was to try and protect small content creators from harassment and cyberbullying. Which I think that if that's the case, I think that's a good move. I think, to be fair, the question is, why do you really need dislikes? If you can just simply measure by, it's kind of like that thing of, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. To be honest, it's one thing to hide it, but why do you even need dislikes? You can simply just say, all right, the people who like this kind of content the most are the ones who are going to favorite it. And if you don't like it, you don't say anything. The absence of a comment is your equivalent of your no vote. Yeah, you don't really need dislikes. It's adding negativity to social media, and I think that's it. To me, it sounds like it's a step to remove negativity from social media, and I think that's a good thing. So let's see here. Yeah, Amar mentions it's sent to the creator versus the public. Which, yeah, I mean, that's fine if you can still see that. Although if they don't have a dislike button, then how would you even know if someone dislikes it? So maybe it's just one of the things where they're removing the dislike. I don't really know, but I'm also not that necessarily interested in going in and mining the facts behind the story. I don't care that much. I'm just happy to keep making stuff. So let's see here. All right. Some more comments about the likes and dislikes. And Amar makes a good point. As always, he says, in order for you to really like something, you subscribe and follow what that person is doing. Yes, see, that's the true point. It's more about how much you interact with the stuff that really, shows the difference in terms of interest in the content. Let's see here. NMM says, good point. Not commenting, not even viewing is more powerful because a dislike always follows view count increasing. I just assume, if you're into it, letting people know, and like I said, forwarding the videos to other people and sharing it. There's videos I watch online that I'll send to my other art buddies. I'm like, this is a cool piece of content, or this is an interview. A lot of times, whenever I see an interview with Howard Chaykin, he's always entertaining, and he always drops an interview with at least one writer or artist I've never heard of, and I always need to go and look that up. So that's always fun. All right, guys. So let's go back to that big camera here, and let's say our goodbyes. Let's see here. Got some books laying around. So speaking of engaging with material, so if you enjoy these videos, if you'd like to get an additional bonus live stream twice a month, and those are some long live streams. I mean, we went long here today. We went almost 2 hours. Usually we do the art book study group, and that'll go like 3 hours. We've had a couple that are like 4 hours long. Along with that, you can read my comic books for free digitally. All of that and more at patreon.com/Jeremy. That's patreon.com/GERIMI. And as Animen pointed out, the link in the description doesn't seem to be working right now, so we have to go in and fix that link. However, if you type it in exactly as it's written here on the screen, that will take you to the Patreon page where you can become a subscriber for as little as $2 a month. And if you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, receive work-in-progress animated GIFs, notifications when I've got new art prints or comics released, and you can also, I usually will put an update on what I'm reading or watching. I call it my media diet, what I'm consuming and how it affects the things that I create and the ideas it gives me. You get all of that for more at my newsletter. That's newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you would like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, digital, or if you read digitally on Comixology or Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. They'll forward you to my Amazon author page. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel I'm the artist and writer of. It is Eye of the Gods. This book is a psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. You can also pick up Volume 1 of Morningstar, Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, told as a Western. Volume 1 continues the first 4 issues of this series. It's called Welcome to Heaven. Also recently released, Volume 2, Abandon All Hope. This has the conclusion of the series. Both of them have tons of back matter, character designs, sketches, script excerpts, thumbnails, layouts. I show you like just as much of the process as I show you here. I've got it in print for you guys to check out. All that and more at amazon.jeremy.net. Again, thank you everyone for the great conversations, keeping me company, all the insightful questions and conversation as we hang out and create work and comics and artwork. Everybody, that's it for now. Go be creative.